Well, we said BoJack Horseman couldn't get any darker after last season, and after this season, it proves that we have no idea what the fuck we're talking about. Hey guys, coming over the season of BoJack Horseman, and yes guys, I just finished the season in 2 days, just like I did with Season 1, just like I did with Season 2, and of course I did it even faster for Season 3. In fact, I think it's probably the fastest I've ever finished a season, like, ever. It's just insane, and I don't know why it takes me such a short amount of time to go through BoJack Horseman, but it's just a show that's so easy to plow through. I mean, it's so addicting, it's so bingeable, and that's something I just love. Now, I was definitely really looking forward to this season, mainly because of the fact that how great Season 2 was, and for me, you know, this is how I'd say it. I say Season 1, I almost stopped watching because I didn't really like it, but then Season 1 showed me what potential the show could do. Season 2 built upon the potential and just put the show at its highest point, and I was a bit worried about Season 3, though, because I really thought, okay, Season 2 was so great, can Season 3 be better? And I really didn't know if Season 3 was going to be even as good as Season 2. I thought it was honestly going to be a disappointing season, but then that trailer came out, and that made me very happy, and I have to say, guys, that not only did Season 3 completely exceed my expectations, it might just be the best season yet. I absolutely love Season 3. I think it is such an interesting season, and it's so drastically different from the first two seasons in many ways, and I'll talk about what I mean from that, but it is by far the darkest season, the funniest season, and I think the furthest we have ever gone into BoJack's psyche yet, and I'll get into all of that while reviewing the season, which, guys, of course, full spoilers throughout this entire review. I'm going to be talking about every event that takes place this season. Well, all the major ones. Some of the things, like Episode 3, I'm not really going to talk about that much because not much happened. It's them solving a murder or whatever. Didn't really matter. But other than that, I'm going to pretty much talk about everything. So, if you guys haven't seen the season of BoJack Horseman, don't watch the rest of this video. I'm going to basically spoil pretty much everything that happens in this season, and like I said, I obviously don't want you guys to be spoiled, because I want you guys to enjoy it, and I'm pretty sure that most of you haven't made it this far as I have with the show. You know, I'm pretty sure most of you are still binging Season 3, so just don't watch the rest of this review until you finish Season 3. So, let's just get into it. So, there are a lot of... One of the things I love about Season 3, I have to say, is that it really plays out as one big story. Everything connects in some way, even things you don't think connect very well, and that's something that I really did love, because a lot of this season feels very random, and feels very sporadic, but then you eventually realize it's kind of the point of the season, and I'm going to get into that in a little bit, but let's talk about, of course, the stuff going on with BoJack first, because there is a shit ton of stuff to talk about. Oh my god, I mean, it really is crazy. It was kind of soul-crushing in terms of my emotions and everything, kind of destroyed my soul a little bit, but basically, the basis of this season, I guess the basic plot is Secretariat, and how everyone wants it to be the comeback for BoJack. Everyone's trying to make Secretariat this huge success, while we see BoJack clearly isn't as, you know, he's kind of worried of what's going to happen with Secretariat. He's worried it's not going to be as good as it is. He definitely has a lot of regrets, and I really think that plays into this entire season. In fact, the BoJack we see this season is way different than the BoJack we saw in Seasons 1 and 2. The BoJack in Seasons 1 and 2 was very risk-taking, and he was very much, just, you know, he was a risk-taker. He didn't really give a fuck about a lot of things. But Season 2 really changed him from the boat incident, which we'll get into in a little bit. But there are a lot of things about BoJack that are very different this season. That's something that I really loved, is how more focused we get into his character. Because for the first half of the season, he's in New York. He's with this new publicist, Anna Spadakovica, I think that's how you pronounce her last name, who is played by Angela Bassett. I really did love her character. She is, of course, his publicist, also kind of like his life coach in many ways. She gives him advice and everything, and she really thinks this movie is going to be a huge success. You know, he's going on all these TV appearances, and very casually, in the middle of a TV appearance, someone brings up Horseman around, and this immediately starts to, you know, stir him up a little bit, mainly because of the fact that these people are calling out Horseman around and saying it's just another 90s sitcom, and how it's not that great of a show, and how there's just nothing really that great to it. And this really starts to rattle BoJack up in a way we haven't really seen before, because he immediately starts defending Horseman around, because obviously it's such a big part of his life, and it's not as big as a part as everyone else's lives, and this really starts to hurt him. You know, he really thinks that, oh my god, people don't like Horseman around. You can tell right in that first scene things are going on, but he's very casually just trying to be funny about it, but there definitely is very dark stuff stuff going on there. That's something that's very well done, is even funny scenes, there's something dark about it, and I think that definitely is something that works very well here, and I really did love. But basically, he's terrified of horsing around. He kind of gets into this idea of, can BoJack be successful post horsing around? Is he ever going to be able to get that success again? Is he ever going to be able to have that life again? Is that possible for him to have, or is his life just gone to shit so much that he can't pick up the pieces and try to bring his life back together? Is there any way he can do that? And that's basically one of the big questions this season I absolutely love. Now, Anna Spadakova, getting back to her character, this is a character that is completely focused on two things: money and fame. That's all she cares about. She wants to be successful. She wants a lot of money, and that's what she seems to care about. She's kind of like BoJack was in the first season, kind of shallow, very much washed up, and you definitely do see that with her character. She's not washed up, definitely. She definitely is it together a lot more than BoJack. You definitely do see that. But there's definitely an interesting dynamic between these two. You can tell there's definitely some sort of romance between them eventually that we will get into. But right away, in that, like I said, in this first episode, you can tell that while BoJack is obviously excited about Secretariat, he has a lot of regrets, especially about LA, which I am very happy they touched upon. They really get into this very deep, and I am so happy with that, because for me, BoJack Horseman handled that like no other show has. Many other shows handle it so one-sided and handle it so cliched. I mean, I've never really seen a show handle a almost teen rape storyline as well as BoJack Horseman did, because again, BoJack for the first time ever didn't give in. He knew when to walk away, but this is one of his biggest regrets he's ever had. In fact, right in the first episode, there's a scene where he has sex with this girl who's a fan of him, but he's not just there to have sex with her. He's not just there to have a one-night stand and be like, bye-bye. That's not what he's there to do. He actually wants her to be there to talk to someone, because he can't really talk to anyone about it. I mean, no one really can relate to what he's going through. Plus, everyone has their own thing going on this season that he doesn't get to see them a lot. And he does see them a lot this season, but they kind of all have their own little individual thing going on. But he ends up talking to this girl about horsing around, you know, about the LA incident and everything. He tells her pretty much everything, and we find that she's a reporter. And this very much upsets him, because he doesn't really have anyone to talk to about it. And we'll get into that more in a little bit, because we do get a lot more into that in the last, 7 episodes of the season, which is just incredible, which I'll talk about. But this is all really tied in to another storyline that's going on, which is from 2007 of all things. And I was kind of confused as to why we're getting into this story, because what does 2007 have to do with any of this? I mean, I thought that, we basically have meant to believe that BoJack Horseman was on horsing around and they was just washed up after that happened. After everything that happened with Herb Kazaz and everything, it was just kind of washed up. But we realized that that's not the case. In fact, this is not the first time that BoJack has tried to make success after horsing around. He did it much longer ago in 2007, which I think is just a very interesting story, because you start out in episode 2 and you're like, okay, why am I seeing this? But right away you can definitely tell they're trying to tell a much bigger story here, because this is when him and Princess Carolyn were together. We see how she becomes his agent and everything, but he also gets this gig on the show simply called the BoJack Horseman Show, and that's all it's called. And basically this is meant to show the real side of BoJack. It's meant to get basically a more mature comedy, and it's going to be edgy, and it's a mockumentary. Unfortunately, the show is worse than anyone could have imagined. It completely goes to shit. Everyone hates it. It got canceled very quickly, and we know from the end of the second episode that the show was unsuccessful, and this really shows why BoJack is the way he is with Secretariat. The fact that the same thing happened with this, he's very worried the same scenario is going to happen here. Even though Secretariat's having a very good response and people are responding well to it, even when he's getting good reviews, he's still very tentative, and that's something that I absolutely love, is this more tentative side of him. He's very leery about certain things. He doesn't want to, do certain things like he would in the first season. He's not much of a risk taker. He's a lot more worried, and that's something that we really get into here. He's a much different character than we saw last season, because last season was him trying to get his life back together, and this season is really him, I think, really focused on his legacy. That's one of the big parts of the season, is BoJack's legacy. What is legacy going to be go down with? Is he going to be remembered as just some random horse and horsing around, or is he going to be remembered as a genuine movie star and a genuine actor? That's what does he really want to be? And that's something I think we really got into very well, and I really did love. But back to the whole thing of regrets, there's a lot more regrets that BoJack has. He also, one of his biggest regrets this season is with Kelsey. If you remember, Kelsey was the director of Secretariat, and of course he did in fact get her fired, and he deeply regrets this. In fact, episode 4 is definitely one of the highlights, I think, this entire show, because I have never really seen an episode quite like this, where there's almost no dialogue in episode 4. Episode 4 is a visual story in every way, shape, and form. There's barely any dialogue. There's one quick conversation with Anna Spadakova, and then he hangs up, and then the rest of the episode is just him trying to get to Kelsey, him trying to make a connection with her, and it kind of reminded me of Anomalisa, of him just trying to make a genuine connection, and I think it was really cool the way they did that. You see him, he's trying to get to Kelsey, he's trying to make up for everything he did, he writes this letter to her, but he also gets caught up in this other story with this little seahorse that he finds. Seahorse that he sees the seahorse mother just gave birth and well, not the seahorse mother gave birth, basically he sees this little seahorse, and he kind of raised it as his own. It's kind of like his chance to kind of imagine what his life would have been like, again, if he would have just gone to Maine with Charlotte. And it's just like what we got in Season 1, Episode 11. The only difference here is that this is actually happening. This isn't BoJack imagining. He's actually raising this little this little seahorse. But then he comes to that realization that this seahorse has a family of 6 other seahorses, and the seahorse has a dad, and BoJack, the best scene, I think, in this entire episode is not him and his whole thing with Kelsey. For me, the thing that really sold this episode is him looking at that seahorse family and just thinking, that could have been me. I could be living this life right now. I don't have to be this big celebrity. What BoJack wants is a connection. That's what he wants. We realize that in this episode. He doesn't want fame. He doesn't want fortune. He wants a genuine connection. He wants people to be there for him. He wants to be able to talk to people, and he doesn't really get to do that a lot this season because everyone is so caught up in Secretariat that they don't really seem to give a shit about BoJack's personal life. And that's something I think that's very interesting and honestly kind of a realistic portrayal in many ways. And again, he's a horse, but that's something that this show just does so well, is that it is an animated show, but it's so realistic in the way it portrays this kind of issue, and I absolutely love the way that was done. And then it even is more tragic because at the end of episode 4, we see he's written the letter to Kelsey, and the ink is completely smudged because he's underwater and everything, and because he doesn't know what anyone's saying. There's a good visual gag at the end that I'll talk about when we get to more to laughs and things like that. But he looks at the letter, and it's completely smudged, and he completely ruined it. He wasn't able to say to Kelsey what he wanted to, and eventually he does get to talk to her, but again, he ends up ruining him. We'll get into that in a little bit, but that really doesn't end up working well for him either, so that really does suck. The other big regret he has this season comes in a little bit later, definitely. It comes in a little bit later. It's, not as focused, it's not as early in the season, it's a little bit later in the season, but it definitely, I think, is just as interesting as the other things I've been talking about. Because out of all the characters this season, I think 2 central characters are the ones that play the major role. Either Princess Carolyn, his relation with Princess Carolyn, and what they've been through, and his relationship with Todd. Very much so. I mean, we very much tied to this in the end of Season 2. These 2 have developed a genuine friendship, and that's something that I really love. In fact, BoJack even says in an episode, Todd's a good kid, but he just makes some mistakes sometimes, and he's really starting to think of Todd as less of an annoyance and just, his roommate, and more of a genuine friend, someone he can really count on. So when he does what he ends up doing in episode 7, you can definitely see why things end up the way they do, which I'll get into. But basically, in episode 2, that 2007 episode, we see Todd meets this girl, Emily, and I'm like, the second we were introduced to her, I'm like, we're gonna see this girl again. They're obviously trying to set up a love interest for Todd, and I was all for this, and I'll tell you why I was all for this, because you guys know I'm not a fan of Todd getting these random subplots, and he doesn't, thank God, have a random subplot this season. He has a recurring plot, and he's really trying to, they really toned down a lot of his dumbness this season. He is still definitely very dense at things, but he's a lot more childish, and that's something I really do like, is that he's a lot more content with himself, we definitely see. He is with this girl, Emily. He does, in fact, reunite with her at a wedding, though, that they go to, and, right away you can see that she wants to get frisky in the bedroom, and he wants nothing to do with it, actually. He just wants to mess around with her, act like kids, and I think this is a perfect example of how different BoJack and Todd really are. BoJack is a go-getter. He'll jump at things every time, he'll do whatever he can, and if he gets an opportunity, he'll just do it without thinking. He'll do it the second he gets it. Todd, however, really thinks things through, and he really just doesn't do things right away. He's not just gonna have sex with every girl. He's not like BoJack, who every girl he meets, he has some sort of encounter with. In fact, there's a line, and I think in episode 10, where Princess Carolyn says, is every girl you work with, you're going to end up fucking? And he even basically says yes. You know, he basically said that there's no girl that he can't not have sex with, because it's just something that he does. Every girl he has a connection with, he has to have sex with, and that's not how Todd works. Todd wants to be more of a friendship with Emily, and you definitely see that. So when things happen the way they do in episode 5, you know something definitely is going to go down, because there's this conversation between BoJack and Emily very briefly in episode 5. All she says is, hey, and we don't know what else happened. We don't know what else happened there, but we know definitely we're going to find out, you know, what happened with that. And then we get to really what went down in episode 7, which, mind you, is the entire episode is just one telephone conversation, and it's so compelling the way that's done. I mean, yeah, there are some things in between. Most of that episode is BoJack on the phone, trying to cancel a newspaper description, and discovering a lot more about himself than he thought, and it's so well done. I mean, I didn't think an episode like that, I thought it was going to be a silly episode, I really did, but there's so much more to it, we find out. The biggest regret that he has with Todd is the fact that at the wedding, after him and Emily said hi to each other, they got close, and they did, in fact, sleep together. And Emily's now living at their apartment, and, you know, Todd has this whole thing. He's working on Mr. Peanutbutter all season, which I'll talk about. But, you know, him and Emily, it seems like they're going to get together, and BoJack is really trying to hide this as well as Emily, but eventually it has to come out, and it really ends up badly for BoJack when it does come out. And eventual Todd confrontation in a second, but let's back up a little bit and get to episode 8, which is a really great episode about accepting offers and really about moving on, because a big part of this season is, okay, Secretary's a big hit, what does BoJack do after it? What is his next project going to be? He gets tied with 3 different projects, and his hands are very tied here because they are all very compelling offers, and the first one is from Princess Carolyn, who offers him this idea from David Pinchner, which I love the way they do, just little jokes like that I think are very fun. I'll get into that when we get to, like I said, to the jokes and everything. But he has to accept a script, and it's kind of like a post-apocalypse kind of thing, and it's very adult, and he's playing a very different kind of character than he wants. He's playing a very different kind of character than he did in Secretariat, so he's got that. Then he gets a call from someone from Horsing Around. I can't remember his name right now, but he gets a call from him who wants to do like a new version of Horsing Around, and BoJack says yes to it because he wants a part in it, but then he basically shuts it down because he doesn't really want. Then he's presented this new offer from Kelsey, and you're thinking, alright, finally this is going to be the chance for Kelsey and BoJack to reconnect. That's what you're thinking, because she gives him this script, and the idea is kind of genius, honestly. It's about this man that he works at a gas station, and he is, I think, a drunk, and his daughter and him, you know, he argues with the daughter about jelly beans or whatever, so it's kind of like an independent film, but it's exactly what BoJack is looking for. He's looking to play a serious role. He doesn't want to be taken as this cartoon, and he wants to be taken seriously. That is exactly what BoJack needs. The problem is his hands are so tied that he can't accept any of these offers, really. And you're thinking, okay, he's going to end up doing Princess Carolyn's film and everything. He ends up basically saying no to Kelsey, because what ends up happening is he does decide to do the script with Kelsey, but unfortunately he responded too late, I believe, is what ended up happening. He responded too late, and so that's kind of ruined. He responded too late. Then the one with the other one he was kind of just joking about, so he doesn't do that one. So he's kind of tied to the one with Princess Carolyn. He kind of wants to do that one. And also, I forgot to say before this, we really get more into BoJack and Anna Spadakofika and their whole relationship, because, again, just like the girl in the bedroom in episode 1, he doesn't just want to be having one-night stands anymore. He wants to have meaningful conversations, and he talks to Anna Spadakofika and says, you know, what's going on with you? I want to know more about you. She says, you don't want to know more about my past. It's just a very interesting scene overall. We'll get into that in a little bit, but let's go to Princess Carolyn and BoJack, because their whole relationship is very interesting. You know, they've been working for 23 years, and one of my favorite episodes this entire season is entirely just one scene, and it's them at this dinner celebrating the 23-year anniversary of working together, and BoJack just outright fires her. He fires her right on the spot, says, I'm done with you, I don't want you to be my agent anymore, and he fires her, and it's such a big change for Princess Carolyn. All her life she has worked with BoJack, and she can't think of herself not working with him, but at the same time, it's kind of good for her. Because, like I said, Princess Carolyn being this agent really is something she didn't realize how, stressful it was. And she kind of gets to get out of it. At the same time, she doesn't want to lose that friendship with BoJack. And this episode, they really get to come to a halt and realize that they are friends, but they just can't really work together anymore. And it's kind of sad, but they are still going to be friends in the long run. They just can't really work together anymore. It's kind of like the ending of, something that we've seen a lot in the show. Is that from the beginning, these two have worked together. And now they're not going to work together anymore. He says goodbye to her pretty much, and it's definitely very sad. But then we get to episode 11, which is really when things get crazy, which is the Oscars. And this is something that everyone was hyping up for. In fact, I heard people say that the season's going to end with the Oscars, and we could not have been more wrong with the way this played out. But I love the way it's played out as well, because basically what ends up happening is BoJack is, in fact, seemingly nominated for an Oscar. And what I love about this is that when he's nominated, he feels absolutely nothing. Why? Because he had absolutely nothing to do with the role. He knows deep down he was not at all a part of this. I mean, it was not him that played the role. It was, this robot or whatever that they dubbed in. And he knows that none of this success was his doing. And he feels like this is pointless. He feels this is just another meaningless thing in his life. It doesn't matter at all to him. And that's the thing I think is very interesting here. And basically, on a Spadakofika, they convince him to throw this huge party, and everything's going well. Diane warns him that she's really worried about him, that something bad's going to happen, because this always seems to happen to him. Something good happens, and then he ends up get into a very deep depression, and probably the worst possible thing happens because Mr. Peanutbutter was the one that read the Oscars, but we find out in a flashback that he was with Todd. He lost the Oscar nominations, and they came with them on their own, and basically, those were the Oscar nominations, but unfortunately, they were caught by the people who were supposed to have, the votes and everything, and BoJack, we find out, was not nominated for an Oscar, and even though he didn't care now, he actually seems to care now. Like, he genuinely feels crushed. The fact that just for a few minutes, he felt like he was on top of the world, and now it's all come crashing down. All of that success, all the work people have said, everything people have said about Secretariat, he feels is done. Even though it is a movie that is getting good praise, he feels it's done. He feels like he's not going to hear it anymore. He feels like he's a failure, and it's just this incredible scene, and I love the way that was done, especially the way that we hear that loud noise go on when he says you're not nominated for an Oscar. BoJack's obviously freaking out. He wants nothing to do with him. He just wants to kind of be away, and this is when he goes to Todd, he tells him everything that's going on, and this is when we finally get the confrontation between these two, because I think the entire season has been pretty much leading up to this conversation, really, this conversation between these two. And like I said, even though these two, they don't have a ton of screen time together in this season, well, they do, but not like a ton of stuff. This really is their biggest conflict this season. This is really what everything was leading up to, we basically see. Basically, BoJack goes to Todd, and he tries to talk to him what's going on. Todd knows something happened with Emily, because obviously Emily left. He felt it wasn't good for her. BoJack's wondering where Emily is, and Todd knows that something happened there. But what I love about Todd is that he doesn't suspect the worst. He thinks that it's just some secret that he was keeping or something like that. He didn't even suspect that those two had sex. He didn't even fathom that idea going through his mind that someone that BoJack calls his best friend would actually have sex with someone like Emily. And he obviously freaks out. And what he says to BoJack is, I think, one of the most soul-crushing things and one of the most real things we have ever heard Todd said. And this is one of the reasons why I love this season so much, because of what they did with Todd. They turned Todd from a really ridiculous buffoon to a much more serious character that actually is very well established. I think finally Todd has turned into a three-dimensional character, and this scene just finally proves that. Because he says to BoJack straight out, he says, I know that you're not happy, I know that you're in this depression, but it's not about the past, it's not about, the memories, it's not about Secretariat, it's you. It's all been you, it's always been you, and you're the one that put yourself in this depression, and it pretty much ends their friendship. I mean, these two seem to no longer be friends anymore, and honestly, I am with Todd on this. How can you forgive someone who did something like that, who the one girl you seem to somewhat have a chance with completely fucked it up, and now it seems like there's no chance for these two to be friends again. It's a very sad scene, but it really sets the stage for episode 11, which is when things just get insane, which let's just talk about it. Now, commonly in BoJack Horseman, it's, like I said, most times, the penultimate episode is the big game changer of the season. That was the episode that showed me what Season 1 was capable of with that incredible ending at the end of episode 11 in Season 1. It gave us probably the most soul-crushing moment of the entire series in Season 2, and in Season 3, it makes it even more soul-crushing with what makes us think it's going to be a hopeful, fun episode and turns into probably the most depressing episode of the show we have seen yet, and we're going to talk about, because Sarah Lynn, we briefly touch base with her in one episode. She is seemingly sober, and we see her in this episode, she's seemingly sober. BoJack, at the end of his rope, really with no allies at all, because everyone's pretty much against him at this point. He has no one on his side at this point. Princess Carolyn's gone off with this guy. Mr. Peanutbutter and Todd are doing things together, and of course, Diane and Mr. Peanutbutter have never been closer. We'll get into their arc in a little bit, because that's really the only thing to talk about. BoJack's all alone, and he contacts Sarah Lynn, says you want to have fun for a little bit, and they go on this huge drug binge and alcohol binge, which we basically are to suspect goes on for weeks, not just a couple days, weeks. Like this, he keeps blacking out throughout the entire episode, and it's such a well-done device the way they did that, just to show that even BoJack can't handle this. Even someone like BoJack, who can handle anything, he can't handle the drugs, and Sarah Lynn, you can just tell throughout this, she's really starting to reflect on what's going on, and she talks to him about, the best thing to do is to make these amends. The problem is, half of the amends he makes are fake, because he's so high off his rocker that half of these amends he's making aren't even really amends. I mean, there's this guy he thinks looks like Todd, and it's not really Todd. Diane and Mr. Peanutbutter, he ends up trashing their apartments, and things like that, so it doesn't really work out with them. And then Anna even tries to pull him out of it. She tells him the story about her being a lifeguard and how you're supposed to save someone and how she realizes she can't save him. And it's really her saying goodbye, I think. It's really her saying, look, I tried to save you, but I realize I can't save someone who's already broken, because she just can't do that anymore. And he needs to realize that she can't save him. I don't think it's that he can't save anyone, it's that she can't save him. And I think she's definitely realizing that here. So that obviously doesn't go well. But then we get to the final 6 minutes of this episode, which is just... I did not think the show was capable of going any darker than Escape to LA was, but it did. It did, and what happens here, I still can't get over. I honestly, it crushed my soul. It really did, because they go to Penny's house, not Penny's house, the last place he makes, and he doesn't remember, the last amend he wants to make is with Penny. Obviously, that whole situation that went down with her and Charlotte and everything, which he goes in this great rant in this AA meeting, and it's a great scene. I absolutely love the way that was done, which, a 12-step meeting, but AA meeting, kind of the same thing. But basically, he goes to Penny, and she sees, and she tries to not make himself notice, but unfortunately he does make himself notice, and the second she sees him, a light bulb just goes off. She realizes who she is, says, get away from me, I want nothing to do with you, and he is terrified. He thinks he ruined her life. He thinks that he made her parents get divorced. I mean, there's so many things going through his head, and he's really freaking out as to what he did, and Sarah Lynn saying that she seems okay and everything, and she even says to him, you made me okay. So it's very interesting the way that was done. But the way they touch upon Sarah Lynn and BoJack is a way they've never touched upon these two before. Sarah Lynn's always kind of been just a fun character. She's someone that does drugs, and, she's kind of the stereotype of, innocent little girl turns into this, drug whore, basically, and this episode shows that Sarah Lynn is anything but that, because we get this incredible scene with them after this, where they're sitting on a bed, high off their rocker, just completely losing everything, and they just start to unravel. Both of them start to really unravel. BoJack talks about, everything that he's going through, and all the losses he's had and things like that. And he also talks about how he doesn't really understand love, but what he does understand is that he loves her like a daughter, and that it's not supposed to be a love sort of thing and like a romantic interest. I saw this as he loves her as a daughter. He wants to be with her as a daughter. He's there for her, and she's really the only person that seems to get him. And she finally admits to him in this scene that she doesn't like what she's become. She doesn't like any of this. All of the stuff that she's done, she's finally reflecting that she hates this version of herself. She doesn't like the clothes. She doesn't like the fake boobs. None of it. This is not her at all. This is not all she wanted to become, but it's what she became. She had to accept it, and the one way he's going to turn her life around, take her to the planetarium, the one thing that she wanted to do, and right when it seems like he has it all, and these two are really hitting it off and really bonding, he talks to her in the planetarium, he's calling out for Sarah Lynn, Sarah Lynn is not responding, and we very quickly realize that Sarah Lynn is dead. I don't know how the show can get darker than that, honestly. I was just like, what? First of all, I at first thought this was just going to be a fun episode. I was like, okay, it's going to be a fun episode. They're going on a road trip or whatever. But then when we got to that scene, I'm like, there's definitely going to be something more here. And here's my question to you guys that I'm kind of wondering. Did Sarah Lynn just take BoJack, you know, did Sarah Lynn just go along with this because she knew she was dying? That's what I'm thinking. I think that Sarah Lynn, deep down, she knew this was the last days of her life, and she wanted to live the last days to the fullest, and when she finally came to that conclusion before she died, she finally gained closure with herself, and it gave her, I think, that closure with her death. She realized that she can die now. She's given, you know, she's realized who she is, she's found herself, and she's come to terms with who she is. Now it's her time to die, but this really is the worst situation for BoJack, because finally he was finding someone to connect to, and then they're just gone, and it's just heartbreaking to see. I can't believe the show went this route, especially with a character like Sarah Lynn, like I said, who in the third episode of the show is supposed to be just like a sex symbol. I believe her and BoJack have sex in the third episode. I mean, it's ridiculous. It really is. And I've always really liked Sarah Lynn. I think she's a fun character overall, and I think Kristen Schaal really does kill it. But not only did she kill it in terms of comedy, but she really showed her ability here. I mean, Sarah Lynn is, I think, one of the best characters we've had in the show, because all along, she's been living a lie. She's been living in a lie. She's been living something that she doesn't want, and I think we're kind of starting to see that with BoJack as well. But that's everything that goes down with BoJack this season. But that's everything that goes down with for BoJack this season. I know there's a lot to talk about. We'll get into that in the finale there, because there is definitely stuff that happens in the finale. A lot of stuff happens in the finale, actually. But before we get to the finale, we just have to talk about one more thing, which is Diana and Mr. Peanutbutter. Not a ton of stuff going on here, but what I like about this is that they made it seem like these two were at the end of their relationship, and that this was going to be, you know, their last days as a married couple. It really seemed like last season that there was no hope, that these two were going to split up, and we see they started the season in completely different directions. Diana's working for Princess Carolyn, and Todd's working for Mr. Peanutbutter. We see Mr. Peanutbutter has like this huge company and everything that Diana doesn't really support because she's a feminist and things that's going on there. And eventually they get into this huge fight, and she's not talking to him for some reason. You know, she's not talking to him. He doesn't understand why. They finally get to talk, and Diana realizes in this moment that she's pregnant. She realizes that she's pregnant. She did some drugs, and she goes to Miss Peanutbutter, she goes to the doctor, tells her that she's pregnant, and immediately she wants an abortion. But you see that Mr. Peanutbutter's not so sure about it. And honestly, they took what could have been a very cliche topic and turned it into something a lot more meaningful, in the sense of them really showing what it means to have an abortion. How they didn't try to demonize abortion. In fact, they kind of showed why it can be a good thing, and how it can be a motivation for some people, and how it can show how strong someone is. And that's something I really love, but it also touches upon the subject of, is this something we should really talk about in public? And I think they did that very, very well. It focuses on Sextina, this octopus who wants to have who basically is faking an abortion for her fans, which is a ridiculous storyline, but also ties into Diana, who wants to have this abortion and eventually does go through with it, and this actually brings her and Mr. Peanutbutter closer together, and I really do like seeing that. I thought that definitely was very well done. My only complaint, though, really, is that Diana doesn't have a ton to do here. I mean, other than that, she's not really the most developed character this season. Thing is, though, her season's not about her. The season is about BoJack, Princess Carolyn, and Todd. Those are the characters we're focusing on. So those two, they just don't get as much to do in this season, and it's fine. I mean, Diana had a ton of stuff to do in Season 1, she had good stuff in Season 2, and she has good stuff in this season. I just want them to give her a little bit more to do, and Season 4 definitely hints that she's going to get more to do. So, that's really the only other arc I'll talk about, is what happened between Mr. Peanutbutter and you know, Diane, and then I guess the only other thing to talk about in terms of, you know, what happened is, you know, in terms of production and things like that, like I said, this, without a doubt, this is the funniest season we've had. I mean, there are so many visual gags in this season that I just loved. You could just pause every episode, look at the movie posters in the background. Absolutely genius. Absolutely genius. I was laughing my ass off at so many little things and just so many subtle jokes that I absolutely loved and I thought were so well handled. Just like changing the celebrity names. I mean, they really went all out in terms of getting us a funny season. I was laughing my ass off constantly, but I was also crying so much. That's something the show can do so well. It projects so many emotions in you. You can go from laughing to crying in a second, and That's something I think they just did so well. I absolutely love that. I think, like I said, by far this is the funniest season. I laughed so much. I thought there were so many funny scenes in this season. But at the same time, most of those funny scenes, there is something dark in those scenes. Like I said, in episode 2, you know, there are some things... The 2007 stuff is great, but there's very sad stuff in episode 2, definitely, especially the ending where we find that the show got canceled. And then episode 4, probably the funniest joke of the entire season, with BoJack realizing that he could talk underwater all along. It's still kind of tragic because he could have talked to Kelsey. He could have had that meaningful conversation with her if he would have just turned the button on. That's why she was avoiding him, because he wasn't saying anything, and it obviously freaked her out. You know, she wanted to talk to him, and she couldn't, and it's because of the fact that he didn't realize that you had to turn the thing on. So I thought that definitely was very interesting. Really good gags there. Really did enjoy it overall. Really add to the season, and definitely, like I said, for me, even though this was the most darkest season, it's also the funniest season I think the show has ever done. I have never laughed harder at this show. I think this season was so funny. Absolutely loved it, and this continues to be one of the funniest shows on TV by far. But now I'm going to get into the season finale, guys, which this season finale, I mean, it's not really fun to talk about. It's not, because this is a soul-crushing finale that is not at all fun to watch, but it is kind of fun to watch as well, and that's something I do like, is that this finale is not completely depressing, and is by far the best finale BoJack's ever done, because I always think of BoJack Horseman like this. The first 11 episodes are leading up to the penultimate episode. The penultimate episode basically answers the main question of the season. Episode 12 is them wrapping up the season and showing what's going to happen in the next season. Not the case with this episode, because most of this episode is basically a wrap of the entire season. It's showing how everything came together, how all these pieces came into play, especially in the 2007 arc, which has to do with BoJack and Sarah Lynn, with him basically wanting to, we realized in 2007 in the BoJack Horseman, you know, show, he wanted to get Sarah Lynn as a guest star, and she was a huge pop star, but you can tell she didn't really want to be a part of it. She wanted nothing to do with it. She really just didn't want to be a part of scripts anymore. It's not really what she wanted to do. She wanted to be a pop star and everything, and she rejected it, and that's why they didn't talk for years and things like that. It's just a really interesting story, the way that that was done, but just the emotion they got out of BoJack in this episode, you really do feel bad for him, but he kind of comes around. He decides that he wants to do Ethan Around, which that's the name of him, is Ethan. Ethan Around, he wants to do it. He realizes that it is something that he'd be interested in because Diane talks to him, and Diane's finally, they get to have this meaningful conversation. Not they haven't, but he just hasn't really been listening to her, and now that the one person that he truly understood him and truly get a connection with is dead, now he can have a kind of conversation with someone he was once in love with, and now just feels is just Mr. Peanutbutter's wife, and what she says to him, I think, really is just so meaningful and so much adds to Diane's relationship with BoJack and how much she cares about him and why she cares about him as much as she does. Because I don't think we touched upon this. Diane watched BoJack when she was a kid. You know, Diane watched Horsing Around when she was a kid, and it, you know, pulled her out of some very dark times in her life, and she talks about how we need that kind of show on TV. We need shows like Horsing Around. We need that to be on TV, and BoJack realizes that she's right, that he needs to do Ethan Around, but unfortunately, it ends up going horribly wrong. Once he does Ethan Around, everything just comes to haunt him. The fact that, this kid is saying she wants to be exactly like him, it just scares him, and you don't know what he's gonna do. And the second when BoJack said he's leaving, when Ethan says, "Where are you going?" BoJack says, "I don't know," I'm like, he's gonna commit suicide. Like, I literally thought he's on the verge of suicide. That's exactly what he does. He goes in the truck, and he, at this point, he's ready to kill himself. He is going on in that truck to die. That's what he's doing. He's going on the road to die, and again, I can't believe how emotional this was, but I was honestly on the verge of tears here. I'm not gonna lie to you. And then the ending is truly beautiful. He sees these horses running basically, kind of like how Secretariat did, and it just gives him the motivation to realize that if these horses can do this, then he can as well. He can get that motivation back. He can turn things around. This does not have to be the end for him. He can make a comeback, and he's going to do whatever he can to do that, and that is the way the season ends for BoJack, but it's not the only thing to talk about that happens in this finale. because other characters get some job offers, as well as Princess Carolyn, we find out she has this revelation that the reason she doesn't want to be an agent is because she wanted to be a manager. And yeah, her boyfriend says to her that's exactly the same thing, but she wants to be a manager now. We definitely see that. Diane's now is going to be working for this blog about feminism, which is interesting. And then Mr. Peanutbutter, this is interesting, seems to become the mayor because he saved the town from this huge crisis that was going on, which is ridiculous, about Margot Martindale, whatever, which is a hilarious joke, by the way. I thought that was definitely very funny what they do with Margot Martindale, you know, definitely one of the best things she's been in a while. But I think it was very interesting. He's going to be the mayor now. And then it seems like Todd and Emily are growing a genuine connection. So while BoJack's going through all this stuff in his life, everyone else is just kind of moving on. And that's something I really like. It's not really their story, you know, but it's not really, BoJack's not really a part of their story anymore. They're moving on with their lives. They're doing things with their lives. They're progressing. And it really hints, I think, that they're going to continue in the show, but it's going to be more of an ensemble show. And that's something that I'm looking forward to. I really do want to see these characters have more to do. As much as I love focusing on BoJack, the show can't get darker. I mean, there's absolutely no way the show is going to get darker after BoJack trying to kill himself, him being at the end of his rope. I don't see how you can get darker than that. There just isn't a way. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what ends up happening next season. I think it perfectly sets things up for what happens next season. And overall, I just thought it was a very good ending. The way that everyone really got something out of this. There wasn't any filler in this episode either. Even though there was that ridiculous stuff with Mr. Peanutbutter, it eventually did tie into things. That he's going to be the mayor of the governor, not the mayor, the governor of the mayor of California. And it's pretty crazy we find out that he's going to be the mayor. He doesn't really know what it means. And I also have the fact that even though Diane and Mr. Peanutbutter don't really agree on the way they see things, they still are going to be, you know, a happy married couple because she'll always love him. She'll always be there for him. Now, Kimiko Glenn's character does hint at, well, she's in everything recently. I mean, she's in Orange is the New Black. She's in Waitress. I mean, she really is killing it. But she tells her that, you know, their relationship is doomed. I don't think they're gonna break those two up. I think this season definitely hinted that those two are here to stay. Definitely, I think we definitely do see that. I just thought overall it was a very good ending. For me, like I said, the best finale the show has ever done, because it didn't just feel like an epilogue. It felt like a wrap-up of everything. It felt like this is why this entire season came together. Everything just fit together perfectly. All the pieces came into play, and that's really why I think this was as good as a finale as a show could ever do. I mean, I think they can definitely top this finale, but it was still really great. I thought it was very well handled. It was mainly all about BoJack with a few brief commercial breaks in the middle showing what everyone else is doing, but I absolutely love that. Love the way that was done. Perfect way to start things out. Really sets us up for what definitely should be a very different, but I think very optimistic and much more lighthearted, hopefully, not lighthearted, but a lot more hopeful Season 4. So overall, guys, I absolutely love BoJack Horseman Season 3. This was so much more than I thought it was going to be. It goes into so many dark topics such as PTSD and, you know, a legacy, and really, can you top success and everything? You know, are you going to stay successful and things like that? And really went into BoJack's mind in a way we haven't really seen before. And also because of the risks it took. Like I said, there are a lot more risk-taking episodes, such as the episode with no talking, the episode where it's entirely a phone conversation. Just little things that very much could be divisive. They make it so much more interesting, and I absolutely love that. I think it's really cool the way they did that. And of course, I am definitely giving BoJack Horseman Season 3 a 5 out of 5 or an A+, without a doubt. I mean, this for me is the best season the show has ever done. I absolutely love this season. Things, like I said, that didn't make sense eventually did make sense. Everything just tied in so well. Felt like they were telling one big story, and really, to me, I think if you've stuck with the show this long, this really is as good as the show will be. I don't know if they'll be able to top it from here. I really don't. Again, I didn't think they could top Season 2, so maybe they could. But I don't really know if they can top it. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. I honestly don't know. But by far the best season they've ever done. This is by far one of the best shows on TV, and will for sure make my list not only of the best summer shows on TV, but of the best shows of TV in general. Definitely, without a doubt. So overall, guys, in my review of BoJack Horseman Season 3, let me know what you guys thought of the season. You have seen it. What did you think of how different it was compared to the first two seasons? Love to hear your thoughts on that. And I will see you guys in my next video, which will be for Outcast. I know I meant to review that last night. The episode hasn't gotten online way too late, and that's why I wasn't able to review it till today. But I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.